This is Stephen Fox, founder of United Nations Santa Fe, at the home of my good friend Elizabeth Lockhart, a great musician in the Joan Baez tradition. And I have some important news to relate to you. I now have two heads of state that recognize what I'm doing as founder of United Nations Santa Fe. Vis-a-vis, that means face-to-face. It's an old French term, but it's used frequently in diplomatic circles. What it means is about or concerning, vis-a-vis. Vis-a-vis these concepts I put together of pharmaceutical genocide. Not many people in the world comprehend that, nor do they comprehend what chromosomal implosion means. And to all the victims of the pharmaceutical corporations, I extend my deepest sympathies and tell you it's the end of the road for you. But you have recourse with the international court system. I don't mean the district court, I don't mean the magistrate around the corner, I don't mean the justice of the peace up in Truchas, New Mexico. I mean the real courts in The Hague. I do not mean the United States Supreme Court or the U.S. court systems. They're victims too. So the Hague courts, the International Criminal Court, received an indictment from a 46-page searing indictment from a woman lawyer in London, Hannah E. Rose. And she was filing it on behalf of Michael Yeadon, who was a vice president of Pfizer, who stepped down. I guess his conscience was bothering him, and he said, "This is wrong. I'm not going to do this." And he walked out and became a whistleblower. So they put together this indictment. It's the court of last resort. If they try the courts and the police and the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General in England, and nobody wants to hear about it, so they took it to the International Criminal Court in the Netherlands and filed it, and it almost immediately got a number. The prosecutor, Karim Khan, who is a Pakistani born in Britain, and the two deputies, one who he got elected to that position. His name is from Senegal, and then there's a woman from Fiji, also named Khan. I don't want to wallow in the rattling off their names, but I'm trying to get across the concept because this is very new, a lot of news.
Stephen, can you tell us more about the International Hague Court in general? As I know it was something that I wasn't really familiar, that was what it was and how it was involved in the current situation with the vaccination.
Okay, well, that's what happened. It's been around since the early 21st century. It was started by a guy from Lesotho named Pakiso Motochoko. And so at the request of the higher court, the International Court of Justice, which has been around, some say back to 1899 when the Tsar of Russia proposed this idea to a bunch of jurists. We said we need to have an International Court of Justice, and it just never happened. And then there's that whole side story about the League of Nations with Woodrow Wilson and the 14 points. Read the 14th point of Woodrow Wilson to see where it really all not began. It began really with Isaiah saying, "Don't beat your swords into plowshares and your spears into pruning hooks," and nations don't learn war anymore. So Hannah Rose and Michael Yeadon took this 46-page document to the court, and they immediately said, "Yes, this meets all the legal requirements for genocide." This proves, what you're saying is actually absolutely accurate. So, they put a number on it. OTP CR 473-021. And another number, well, that's very important in this context because Bill Gates was named as one of the defendants. It was his patent number on the weaponized coronavirus, WO2016-012793A1. That was granted in 2016. He tried to get the patent in the United States, but they turned him down. I still can't tell you exactly why they turned him down, but they turned him down. So he used his influence with the Queen of England to get the patent and for the weaponized coronavirus. So there's some big breakthroughs that have happened. First of all, a court in the Netherlands. See, The Hague is in the Netherlands, and so they have a district court where some victims of some victims said, 7 victims, we're gonna put this together and take on Bill Gates and the Pfizer CEO, the Greek veterinarian, and the former Prime Minister of Netherlands, who is the 14th president of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, Mark Rutte, and he still has that job. So Bill Gates came to that court and said, like, you guys don't have jurisdiction. I'm an American. And the judge said, no, in Dutch, you're being tried in the Netherlands, your victims are Netherlandish, and therefore we have jurisdiction, and don't kid yourself. So you'll have to come back. That was in October last year, October 24th, and it was supposed to come back about Thanksgiving. And the news, there's a complete blackout on it. There's no news on it whatsoever. I've tried and tried and tried. I found out about it. There are a lot of articles about this trial in the Netherlands, but the case it was in the Sri Lanka Guardian. Sri Lanka Guardian. That's a little island nation off the coast of India, and so even they can't find out. But they've done some other articles, and they're very important. So I decided today, I want the next nation that endorses what I'm doing, in addition to Spain and the United States, because I've got Trump wrote a nice letter, and the King of Spain wrote one 3 years ago, and with his wife and next Queen of Spain. I want Lebanon to be the next one. Why Lebanon? Because the present Prime Minister of Lebanon, Nawaf Salam means peace, so his name literally translates to Prime Minister Peace in Beirut. Lebanon's a very old nation. Its symbol is a flag. Its flag is a cedar tree on it, and they're very nice people. They're very good merchants, and some Lebanese here have helped me a lot in Santa Fe, with money and ideas and advice and so on. So I'm really keen on Lebanon. And one thing's important. When all of this came up, I was reading the Secretary General's book, the Egyptian Secretary General. His name was Boutros Ghali. He was from Egypt, and this was in the late 90s. And the Israel's defense forces dropped some bombs on a UN compound, and they said no. They didn't mean to. They had no knowledge. They didn't know it was a compound. They thought it was just a bunch of Palestinian terrorists. But then, unfortunately, there was a Norwegian peacekeeper there that was filming it, and he found, they enlarged the photos of. They found a drone, an Israeli drone with a U.S.-made drone with Israeli markings, and Benjamin Netanyahu at that time said, like, I don't want. We got to keep this hush-hush. We got to keep this quiet. So he got Madeleine Albright, who was the Secretary of State for William Jefferson Clinton, both of them pressured the Secretary General, so you can't put that in the report. That'll have negative influence on Shimon Peres's re-election as Prime Minister of Israel. And the Secretary General, although he's an Egyptian, he's not Islamic. He's a Coptic Christian. He told him to fuck off. He said, I'm not going to do this. My obligation is to the United Nations and not to the United States. So go away, don't bother me. I'm going to put it in the report, and if you don't like it, too bad. So that's what he did. And then they said, well, if you're going to do that, then we're going to oppose you for a second term as re-election as secretary. Usually the Secretary General get 2 5-year terms. So he said, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't care. I have to tell the truth to the UN. That's my obligation. And so they got a new one, and they lined everything up. The African nations were, of course, distraught to lose their Secretary General, the first African. So they got a second African whose name was Kofi Annan from Ghana. And so today I decided to really go all out for the getting Lebanon to be the next one. So I sent a big packet to Nawaf Salam, who left the job as president of the International Court of Justice. This is a very important person. When South Africa looked at what was going on with Israel and the Palestinians and said, this is genocide. We know all about it. We've lived through apartheid. You're separate but equal, you're lying. And so they took them to the court. South Africa took Israel to court, and more than 60 nations testified against that and against Israel. And for all different reasons, all on YouTube, almost every one. Of the best ones were from Pakistan and Spain and the United Arab Emirates, the best testimony. But there was a lot of great testimony, and Nawaf Salam, as the presiding judge, coordinated all that. And so it was important, and he did a tremendous job. And then sometime last year, he decided that he should be the Prime Minister of Lebanon. So they had an election, and he won that. And he's now the Prime Minister of Lebanon. So Lebanon has a council of ministers, all with various titles, and I've been writing to them, and they acknowledge receipt of what I send them. And so if that comes through with Lebanon, that's wonderful. I presented my best possible case to not only to the former judge at the International Court of Justice, and I presented the best I could and gave him all the right reasons and described what, this is a project for United Nations Santa Fe. And I also mentioned that I'd like to be considered for the next Secretary General election, which is 2026. And so maybe I don't have much chance, but I will be considered. And I may be the first one to announce for that, to announce that. And why Antonio Guterres has got to go. He sold Trump didn't fund the World Health Organization for various reasons. You'd have to ask him at a press conference in the White House, why did you not fund the World Health Organization? And that was in his term, 2016 to 2020. So Bill Gates stepped up like at a garage sale. So I'll give you $200 million. Trump wouldn't spend $800 million, but Bill Gates offered $200 million, and he got it. So what do you get for $200 million? He gets a cover for all of his genocide, pharmaceutical genocide plans, ugly stuff in Africa. He gets it's called an imprimatur in Latin, and a cover. It's a legitimate sounding cover. So that's this news today from Stephen Fox, founder of United Nations Santa Fe, And one other thing that's important is that, you know, the Canadian Prime Minister, they should have known better. Justin Trudeau accepted all these injections, enough to kill the whole population of Canada 5 times over for the so-called COVID era. And he rejected it, and he should have rejected it and said, like, you know, I don't want these things. And so, new Prime Minister, Justin getting the jab is on YouTube. They were proud of it. Like, it's, you know, what is it Reagan said in that old movie? Take one for the Gipper. It's some football term. I don't know. Was it Loot Rockney or something like that? Anyway, so this is pretty big news, and so Prince Charles, King Charles III, came and gave a big long speech from the throne, and had a whole bunch of native Canadians there, and all the senators and people. Some people wearing wigs. You know, the British like to put on these white powdered wigs. I don't know why. I don't want to know why. So, what happens next is I'm going to court some other nations. I like Laos, People's Republic of Laos. It's a Buddhist, still a Buddhist nation. I have a long historical relationship with Japan. I've received letters from the emperor, the past emperor. By the way, he got the jab too, and so did his kids. There's one person in the imperial family and she's 97. She said, I'm not getting that. You know, she lived to be 97. Another 3 years she'll be 100. She's a very smart woman. I just learned about her today. So, and the Japanese, you know, they like me. I helped the Hiroshima victims and Nagasaki victims at the United Nations Special Session on Disarmament back in the late 70s. And so, I'm going to talk to Canada again. I've been talking to Canada, to the top people in the Canadian Senate. Canada has 105 senators. I've published articles about why Canada should, you know, impending epidemiological disaster. You can look that up. If Canada fails to label products containing aspartame, and, you know, I could talk for 2 or 3 hours about aspartame. I'll try to sum it up. Probably the Germans were using it on the Jews in the concentration camp to give them something sweet. They didn't know it turned to formaldehyde and methanol, which is wood alcohol. So then some East German Stasi files were uncovered, and then fast forward to 1966, a chemist working for, and this is really hard to believe, a chemist working for G.D. Searle in Chicago ostensibly licked his finger when he was doing some experiment. And he said, oh, this is so sweet. You know, this is at least 200 times sweeter than sugar. So his name was Schlatter. And so G.D. Searle made huge vats of it, and big vats. And they couldn't get FDA approval. The FDA has chemists, you know, they look at it and they say, like, we don't like this molecule. It's bad. It's going to turn to something, you know, turn to formaldehyde and methanol. And so they turned him down. That was 1966. Then when Carter, before Carter was elected in 1976, James Earl Carter Jr., there was Donald Rumsfeld, who was a congressman from Chicago that worked for the Office of the Management and Budget, and then was a defense secretary for the United States. What kind of defense secretary forces the approval of a horrible chemical that poisons all kinds of people. This isn't the way a nation is supposed to be run. You know, to have the defense secretary cashing in on some horrible chemical. He used all his influence. There's hundreds of articles on this. There's even a video of Donald Rumsfeld saying, I'm going to pull in all my markers. We're going to get this approved by political, not scientific or medical means. So Reagan owed him a big favor, and the favor he granted was to get some physician from Fort Detrick out in Maryland, where they were doing experiments with biological weapons and all kinds of horrible stuff. You have to look into it. You know, I wrote an article called A Brief History of Biological Warfare, and I'm pretty sure that Fort Detrick is in there. Bobby Kennedy was going to go down there, and they had something happen about 2 weeks ago. Rand Paul said, well, like, I'm really the senator from Kentucky, the eye surgeon said, I'm really glad you're getting the FBI to investigate this. So, we are just trying to get aspartame taken off the market. I knew a woman in Duluth, Georgia, that started, her name was Betty Martini. Don Martini was her fourth husband. He lived to be 94. She was a very polite woman that antagonized all kinds of people, bad people, the people that worked in the Rumsfeld Foundation, Coca-Cola, which is right there in Atlanta, and someone broke into her mansion in Duluth and almost beat her to death, banged her 81-year-old cranium on the fireplace mantle, and she went off to, a few months later, her husband died, and then she went off to, she went to a hospital, and she talked to her on the phone and said, they're holding me down. They're trying to give me some kind of injection. And I called up the triage nurse and the CEO of the hospital and said, get that woman out of there, let her go home. If she's dying, let her die at home. You're not going to kill her. If you proceed with this, I will pull out every horrible thing I can with the federal government, with the FBI. You're going to be, if you kill this 81-year-old lady, I'm going to make you pay. And I don't mean fiscally. You've got deep pockets. I'm going to make you pay criminally. You're going to be prosecuted. This is a judicial matter. You can't do this to this woman. So they let her out and go home, and she put together her last pages, sent them off to Bobby Kennedy, to the Children's Health Defense, because she wanted him to publish it, and because he did publish another book by a woman, a mutual friend named Judy Mikovits, who went to George Washington University and got a PhD in biochemistry. There's lots more about aspartame. This is current. Aspartame has never been brought into the international court system. The first thing I asked of them was to order Bill Gates to stop pharmaceutical genocide in every jurisdiction. That means everywhere except the jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice, which is almost all the nations. And also to order the FDA commissioner to revoke and rescind all approval for aspartame in the United States.
Can you tell me, Stephen, what are the symptoms of aspartame poisoning, or how does aspartame negatively affect the human species? Do you happen to know that?
Yes, of course. It turns into formaldehyde.
Mm-hmm.
Formaldehyde. What's formaldehyde? It's a yellowish green liquid that's used to pickle body parts. Like, let's say a woman has a Siamese twin or a baby with a brain born outside their head. They're going to die. But the doctor says, like, oh, we want to keep it around to show the medical students that it is possible for a child to be born. They don't live very long, of course.
Yeah. I think I know what formaldehyde is.
Okay,
yeah,
good. It's in methanol. So the symptoms, it's this neurodegenerative illnesses. I mean, it's embalming fluid.
So do you and how much of this, are they saying this is safe because of consumption levels? Is that, is that the story? How are they able to sort of
It's
get
a
away with
total
this?
fucking lie. What's his name? Rumsfeld forced it through, said, oh, it's as safe as mother's milk. This is as safe. Once the U.S. approved it, once he forced the approval for it, with this scumbag doctor named Dr. Arthur Hall Hayes. Hayes wanted to talk about it at some point. He set up with a journalist, but he was mysteriously killed. He died mysteriously. He was going to talk about it and reveal everything. So just make one of these if you're running out. I'll sit here.
Well, we are at 25 minutes right now.
Okay, so I want to answer your question.
Yeah.
The U.S. FDA let people send in their complaints. They started getting all these complaints.
About the aspartame.
Yeah, in Diet Cokes. See, it was approved for dry goods and like cookies and macaroons and stuff like that, like table sweetener. Pour it in your coffee, heats it up. It's 5 times as neurotoxic.
Sweet and low was aspartame, right?
Goes under your tongue, straight to the brain. There's no blood-brain barrier. That's all bullshit. So he said, I'm trying to answer your question. So Rumsfeld, but then the soft drink industry looked at the molecule and said, we don't want this. This is liability. We'll get sued. The Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, we've been through that with Tab, the cyclamates back in the late 60s. We don't want that at all. We'll fight it. But somehow, maybe Reagan prevailed, I don't know. They approved it 2 years later in 1983 for the soft drink. That's the beginning of the Diet Cokes. So all these complaints started piling up. The number one complaint was unattributed headaches, skin allergies, nervousness. There were 92 symptoms. Anybody could look this up. You look up 92 symptoms of FDA recording of aspartame, you can find a bunch of lists. It's
Okay.
And then that was 1983. It was approved for the soft drink industry, and then 1995, the William Jefferson Clinton and Hillary Rodham Clinton, their administration, they can blame it on their administrator. That was their administration, said, we are not going to take any more complaints. We've heard enough. If somebody says, like if I complain to you about something, or you say you complain to me, I'm not going to say, okay, well, I'm going to try to correct this. I'm listening to your complaint, and I'm going to fix it. Not the Clintons. No, they just look the other way, and so it stays on the market. And I tried with the New Mexico legislature, the Hawaii legislature. That's why this thing in Oklahoma is such a breakthrough. And I want to talk about that for a minute, because I haven't told you this. I called that woman from Edmond, and I said, because aspartame is just one of the things that they want. Just a tentative step of labeling it as harmful. And her secretary told me that, well, this other lady from Bartlesville named Daniels, I can't think of her first name, she has a senior position and floor leader. And she said, no, we're going to put this off till next year. So another year goes by. Well, the corporations just love it. They think, well, everybody will forget about it in a year. So this concerns you, Elizabeth. This is because this is the lady from Edmond is, if you were living in Edmond, you grew up in Edmond, where the Central State University, it has a new name now. What's it called? Something like that. It has a new name. I've been there. Never been to Bartlesville. No plan to go. Never been to Norman. But I've been to Edmond. And so so this is a very important. I wrote to the woman, the senator from Bartlesville, and I sent it to all the newspapers in her district, the Daily Oklahoman and the University of Oklahoma newspaper, and even Edmond has Central State has a newspaper, and I sent it to the governor. I said, look, this is really important stuff. Bobby Kennedy and Donald John Trump are paying very much attention to what you guys are doing with this. They want to make America healthy again. They want this stuff off the market. They don't want it just labeled. They want it to be stopped entirely. You know, it's poison. People are duped into drinking a Diet Coke, think they're going to lose weight, and they're actually embalming themselves.
For that matter, we're duped into drinking fluoridated water.
Yes.
Let's start with the fluoride in the water.
Well, Kennedy did start with that, and I took that thing to the mayor and said, like, they didn't know what to do. See, that's an interesting thing you brought up, because fluoride, once again, it was a product that the Germans, this is highly documented, the Germans used on the Jews.
All of this is from German Nazi scientists. All of the food corporations, from R.J. Reynolds owns all this.
Mm-hmm.
All the Reynolds, the cigarette companies, when they couldn't make money, cigarettes got banned and they got, frowned upon. They went to the food, they bought up all the food industries. And now that's why we have all this crap in our food.
Can you talk some more about this, please?
I mean, that's really, I don't retain facts like your brain does, Stephen, but, I can definitely get an impression. And, that is, it's just that alone, the statement alone, and go look it up again, don't take my word for it, but from what I can find, that is true.
Well, with fluoride, it's preposterous to think, that, okay, it's a byproduct of the aluminum.
And I'm not sure, why was the fluoride put in the water?
I'm about to tell you.
Thank you.
It's a byproduct of the aluminum mining industry.
Okay.
Like hexametafluoride or something like that. So the aluminum industries got together and hired a dentist to say, oh, this will prevent cavities. It's totally fucking illogical to put a chemical in water. The water goes into your system.
Illogical.
Water goes into your stomach, and then who could believe
sort of
this?
like a vaccine.
yeah, and more, not as insidious as a vaccine, but really horrible. To perpetuate this lie, dentist after dentist, American Dental Association, like they just keep it mindlessly going on and on and on, and somewhere it's got to stop, and it's going to stop with Robert Francis Kennedy Jr. as health secretary, and
Well, we're dealing with really, really powerful people. So if this administration only has 4 years, that's the frightening part of it, is that depending on if the American public does not catch on to what the schemes of the pharmaceutical industry and the food industry, if they do not catch on and do not become savvy to this,
Mhm.
the consumers, then, we don't have a chance, because I think these people own everything.
well,
Except maybe Elon Musk and Donald Trump, which is funny, actually, because I think that they do own a lot of people and a lot of industries. That this sort of, these people that we're talking about that are running these. I'm not even sure who it is. You probably know more than me, but Bill Gates and the.
I'm not sure that I do know them more than you.
All right.
You have this beautiful home, and you have 3 children, and you kept them always from being vaccinated, and you've done studies, and you know when they're lying, and it's almost like
But we're still not immune. My kids still get the fluoride. My kids still have health problems. I have one suffering from type 1 diabetes. I have one that's mentally ill. So these things are, they're happening. They're already in our environment enough that, I didn't even protecting my kids from all the things that I thought I was protecting them from. You can't protect them anymore. And for that matter, this is what I wonder, if my vaccinations and the things that I was fed as a product of a kid raised by 1950s parents, indoctrinated parents, and getting all of those vaccines and all the things. I'm wondering if these autism spectrum disorders and the mental illness and a bunch of these other food allergies are not caused by the mother transferring a lot of these things to the children.
Genetically speaking,
Through the womb, through childbirth, that they're getting these chemicals through something that was already in me. Because the autism, it seemed like the autism started really around the time of the birth of my first daughter. That's when you really started to
What
hear.
year was that?
About 1997. So you really started to hear, at least, but of course, I was a new parent, so I was on the parent, hearing about things anyway, because I'm a parent for the first time. So that doesn't mean that it wasn't going on before that, but I'm thinking that, there were these autism cases probably took off in the early 90s, and started to it'd be interesting to go back and look at the kind of the data.
Well, point number one in my response is that Robert Francis Kennedy was somewhere in New York or Massachusetts, and a woman came to his door, knocked on his door, and said, I have a child that has autism, and I've done 3 years of studies, and I have a knee-deep pile of articles, and I'm not leaving until you agree to take them in, and you're doing great work with cleaning up the Hudson River, but I need you to look into these autism causes. And he said, okay. He accepted. He wrote a book. He wrote a book called From Intensive Studies. And, he's not playing around. He does thorough research. He gets people, it's a great name, Kennedy. Here's somebody that wants to do something about it, a Kennedy. Suffered great tragedies as a child. His uncle, his father assassinated. And that's a whole nother
and I
story.
do have a problem with people, questioning the science. Every time this subject comes up, everyone's like, well, the science says vaccinations work. And I'm like, have you even looked at the science?
They don't know.
No, not one of the people that claims the science thing has even, and I have looked into the science, or
Yes.
I've at least looked into the statistics and the data that is out there about, the rise and fall of diseases. But it is, it is interesting.
Okay, point number two about autism is about maybe in the last 10 days, the Senator Elizabeth Warren, who ran for president from Massachusetts, tangled with a lot of these battles are being waged in the U.S. Senate. She attacked him and said, these people say you're full of shit about autism, and these people, and I think he's just too polite to whip out a big book and put it in front of her, or walk over and put it on her desk and say, why don't you read my book? There's a 600-page book about autism.
Right. Have you written a 600-page book on autism?
Yeah.
Right.
Don't talk to me until
it is interesting, yeah.
Don't talk to me until you read my book. And then other senators, okay. So I became aware of this autism stuff because, I have a friend whose name is Dr. Kenneth Stoller, and he's a pediatrician. And he has these hyperbaric chambers. He was here in Santa Fe, not too far from here. Children with cerebral palsy, children with burn victims, children with autism. Hyperbaric chamber. That means high pressure, high oxygen, like 102 or 3 degrees, completely dark, no sound. Get in this big thing, and they would improve. Their health would improve. And then the state board of medical examiners ran him out of the state. Well, something happened. So I talked before they kicked him out. He went to California, and now he's back in Taos. So I talked with him about this. I said, you and I ought to drive down and talk to the pharmacy board I didn't know that pharma meant poison in Greek.
Oh, yeah, that's
So I went
funny.
down there with him, and I made my presentation, he made his presentation, and the pharmacy board scheduled subsequent hearings. And I let all the television stations and news people know. The only people that actually showed up was a Spanish-speaking station, Univision, and my Spanish is adequate. I'd talk for 7 minutes in Spanish, and only made one mistake.
Hope it wasn't a bad one.
Well, I didn't know how to say neurodegenerative, so
Yeah, okay.
I asked the reporter, how do you say that? Neurodegenerativo. So they aired the whole 7 minutes, and it ran like 3 or 4 cycles, evening, morning, noon, the next day. And all these Spanish people came up to me and said, wow, you did great, muy bien, gracias, gracias, you did a good job. So, but then the pharmaceutical, the Ajinomoto Corporation, which is from Japan, it's the world's largest maker of this horrible chemical poison. They hired some lawyers through some kind of association, the Calorie Control Council, which is a bunch of stooges that are paid by Coca-Cola. They hired these people. 2 big fat Harvard lawyers came and threatened the pharmaceutical board, said, if you have this hearing, we will sue you individually and we will sue you severally. What does that mean? It means to sue the whole thing, sue the entire pharmaceutical board. So the pharmaceutical board backed off of having an aspartame hearing. And then I went to the Environmental Improvement Board, and I finally took it to the legislature. And it's ugly stuff, but I did my best, and I'm not done with it. Was successful in convincing one head of state in Uganda to not allow it. That was 25 years ago. And more nations, they keep reading what I send them, but ask me one last question.
What are you going to do tonight, Stephen?
I'm going to get a good night's sleep because
Okay.
I'm very happy having communicated with the former president of the International Court of Justice and now Prime Minister of Lebanon. And I'm going to figure out tomorrow what nations do you want to see as part of United Nations Santa Fe? I mean, pick some nations based on ethics, based on consumer protection.
Well, I would like everyone to participate. I would like everyone to get along.
Every nation.
Every nation.
Yeah. Well, see, the standard argument against what you and I already agree on goes back to the Latin, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. Do your best to convince this consumer, this consumer, this consumer, this consumer. I've done all that.
I think there's people interested in what we're talking about in every nation at this point. And so it would be finding those people and having them, wanting to come here and wanting to participate and being an ambassador and taking things back to their nation that perhaps that they could make some change and
All
some
right,
good
so
in those nations.
who are the most likely?
Well, I think mothers, to be honest. I've always think that women should be the deciders of health and human sanctity and children's, the advocates of the children, and also deciding whether we go to war or not.
Well,
Because women, they don't have the same, especially I think they should be women, they should be, or perhaps parents that are in the home with their children, on a regular basis, and they have more than one child. I think those people are invested in the health and security of our nations. I don't think anyone else is. I think other people are misled, and they are power hungry, and they are out for certain things that are more ego driven. And I think that women with children are really out for their children.
They have to
And
be.
the future of our for our children.
So if I transpose what you just said into my world,
Mm-hmm.
it's reach out to United Nations ambassadors who are women, ask them to cooperate, send what I send you, send to the health minister and the justice minister. You gotta have the justice
Or
minister.
parents, parents that are invested. I'm not saying that there are not men that are invested in
Well,
such
I don't
things.
know.
But I will say that, we would protect ourselves by limiting it to women. Because at this point, the men there have been years and years and years of atrocities committed by men, and frankly, they should be banned from the entire political system for the next 20 years.
Mhm.
I just aired that. I guess it's out there.
Yeah. Well,
now you know.
and then heads of state who are women.
Men right now can't even take care of their own children, much less the world.
Well, then,
And that's a very sad statement for me to make, because I am one that I love male energy. I've always wanted, I would rather not be the leader. I would rather have a male in place lead for me, and I think most women feel like this. We'd rather be in our feminine energy, but it's come down to the fact that we're not even safe in our own country. Our children aren't safe, and this is the result of what years and years and years of a masculine rule and leadership in every nation in the world has led us to.
well, there's hope.
And now some of the women are even like the men because they're competing. So there's that too. We could name one, Hillary, for instance. Perhaps I don't know her personally, so I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. But she seems pretty masculine, and just so do some of the female principals I worked with in the school system. They were also very cutthroat, masculine, competitive.
In Florida.
Power-driven, in Florida, power-driven women. And not that there's anything wrong with either thing, but when we're talking about the health and safety of the world only,
Mhm.
then I do believe that it should be a council of mothers or a council of parents at least, with certain qualifications that.
Well, Robert Francis Kennedy, he started a Children's Health Defense Fund. No, it's not fund, it's called Children's Health Defense, not fund. And he had to divest himself of it in order, as part of the Senate hearings. Like they all hammered him and said, like, you were not going to profit off of this. And some of them said, are you trying to undermine our faith in vaccines? I mean, the questions that get tossed to him are ridiculous, but they're on YouTube, and I hope this will be on YouTube. And this should not be a private posting. I want this public, and I want to work at it and get more people watching too. We're up to about 70 people on that thing that you and I filmed. What's so funny?
My son, he's peeking out the window at us.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, maybe he has a question. Ian, do you have any questions?
You don't want to hear that.
I do want to hear it, but I can't hear
So,
questions.
bye-bye.
Thank
Say
you.
bye to
you.
everyone,
Thank
Stephen.
you. Thank you very much.
Okay. And
Namaste.
yes, namaste from Santa Fe.